Hey, hello there. In this video, we are going to learn about the header files in C++. Now, since the beginning of this course, we are using header files. We have no idea what header files are. In compilation video of C++, I have gave you a short introduction to the header files. Okay, so let's quickly get started and let's write a simple code that we usually write at the beginning of writing any code. So we write hash include iostream. Then we write using namespace std, and then we write main function. Now this hash include iostream, this iostream is nothing but a header file, and this hash include is called as preprocessor directive, and it is basically used to include the header file in our program. Okay, so we are going to learn about the preprocessor directive and this hash include syntax. Okay, so don't worry about that, but right now just remember this hash include is called as preprocessor directive, and it is used to include the header file in our program, right? So this iostream is nothing but a header file that we are using since the beginning of this module in our program, and this iostream header file contains the code which is responsible for dealing with input and output of our program. So whenever you want to use cin, cout, cerr, clog, so whenever you want to do any input output related activity, you will have to use iostream header file. Okay, it's very easy. So since the beginning of our module, we are using one header file constantly in each and every code, and that is called as iostream. Now why we need header files? Why there are header files in C++? So basically, before discussing that, let me tell you one simple thing. In C++, header files can be of two types. The first type is called as library files or standard header files, and the second type is called as user defined header files. Okay, so header files can be of two types. First is standard header files and user defined header files. So this iostream header file that we are using is a standard header file. So standard header file is provided by the programming language itself. So this iostream header file is not something that we have created. This is provided by C++ programming language itself, right? So such type of header files are called as standard header files. And then we have second type of header file that is called a user defined header file. So user defined header file means we as a user or as a programmer of the language can create our own header file. So it's very awesome thing, right? We can create our own header file, and that is allowed, that is feasible in C++. Now let me quickly tell you why we need header files. Okay, so till this point or before this video, in all the previous videos, we were writing our C++ codes in a single file. Okay, so the entire code was written in a single file. So this is fine. I mean, we used to write a code in a single file, and the code length was like around 150 lines or max 200 lines. So it is fine. I mean, we can write a code in single file. There is no issue in that. But let's take example of operating system. Let's take example of Linux operating system, which is completely written in C and C++. Okay. Now this operating system is a very huge software. It's a big software. Can you write entire code of operating system in a single file? Or will it be a good practice? No, it will not be a good practice. When we write an entire code in a single file, then the organization of the code becomes little bit messy. If the other programmer want to understand your code, then it will be very difficult for him to understand your code. And that's the reason, as a programmer, we should modularize our code. We should split our code logically in different files, so that each file contains some similar kind of code or similar kind of functionality or similar kind of functions. So if you have a large code and if you want to split it in small chunks or in different files, then you can create your own header file, or it is recommended to create your own header files. Okay, so when we can create our own header file, or when should we create our own header file? Whenever your code is becoming a little bit large, you have multiple functions. In that case, you should split your code in different header files. Alright, so let's quickly see how we can create our own header file. So before creating our own header file, let's quickly define few functions. Let's define a function called as minimum, which will return us minimum of two numbers which we are passing to it as an input. Okay, so let me write int minimum, int number 1 comma int number 2. So it will, so let me just write it like this. See, let me write this function using ternary operator. Okay, so if number 1 is greater than number 2, question mark, I will return number 1, otherwise I'll return number 2. I am again doing a mistake over here. If number 1 is less than number 2, then we will have to return number 1, otherwise we will return number 2, right? So this is minimum function. Let's say we have another function that is maximum. So in this case of maximum, if the number 1 is greater than number 2, we will return number 1, otherwise we will return number 2. Okay, so these are two simple functions that we have created. Let's quickly use them. So let me write cout minimum of, let's say, 10 comma 20. Let's see what is going to be its answer. Similarly, let's call maximum for the same pair, that is 10 and 20. Now let's say I want to keep these two functions in a separate file, but I want to use them over here in main function. So how we can do that? We can put these functions in a header file, in a separate file, and we can include that header file in this program. Wherever these functions are required, we can include that header file at that program or in that program, and then we can use those functions in that program. So let's quickly see. Let's create our own header file. Now to create a header file, let's name it as utility.h. Now generally we name our header file with .h extension. Okay, so that's why I'm naming my header file as utility.h. all right, now let's put the utility code or these functions, utility functions, in this utility.h header file. Okay, now here the editor has started giving us an error that minimum is undefined because it is not getting the declaration or definition for minimum. Alright, so what we will do now, these functions are not present in our own header, own file or own code. They are present in different header file. So what we need to do, we need to include that header file. Now the syntax to include a header file or to import the header file is very similar to this syntax that we are using. There is only one slight difference that we will discuss. So we will have to write hash include. Now in this case, we are not including standard header file, we are including user defined header file. So to include standard header file, what you do, you write name of your header file in triangular braces. I am again saying, again repeating, to include standard header file, you will write name of your header file in triangular braces. But to include user defined header file, you will have to write name of your header file in double quotes. Okay, so let me write hash include utility dot h. Okay, so now we have included utility.h in our code. Now you can see that those errors that the editor was showing for minimum and maximum, they have vanished. Okay, so let's quickly compile this code and let's see if the code is getting compiled successfully or not. So let's run g++ 07 header file.cpp, and you can see that the code is getting compiled. Now let's quickly run the code. You can see that we are getting the correct output, right? So what we have done in this video, we have created our own header file with name utility.h. We have kept our code or our functions that we have in that separate header file, and whenever we need those functions, we are going to import that header file using syntax of hash include, and you will have to write name of your header file in double quotes. Okay, now why we are writing name of our header file in double quotes? Because this is user defined header file, not standard header file. So whenever you have to import a standard header file, you will write its name in triangular braces, and whenever you will have to import user defined header file, you will write its name in double quotes. Okay, so I hope you have got clear idea of how you can create header files, how you can split your code in different files. Now you can create multiple header files, right? So it's not compulsory that you can only have one header file. You can create multiple header files and you can put your data in the multiple header files depending on how you want your code to be splitted logically, right?